welcome to this tutorial which will show you how to create these really lovely gingham checked squares using the crochet technique of Tunisian Entrelac squares. I'm Eleonora, the designer behind Coastal Crochet, and I hope you find this tutorial helpful. Here you can see I have used the gingham checked squares as a central panel for my latest blanket, the Picnic on the Beach blanket. All the details about the blanket can be found over on my website, www.coastalcrochet.com. But this tutorial is just to show you how to create the gingham checked squares. So here's a finished square that I have completed. But a few things about Tunisian Entrelac squares before we begin. Firstly, usually with Tunisian crochet you need a longer hook, but because each of these squares is made one at a time, they're joined as you go, but because each square has no more than 6 loops on the hook at each time, an ordinary standard crochet hook can be used. It is recommended to go up a hook size to what you would normally use because Tunisian crochet produces quite a dense and thick fabric, and so going up a hook size is always a good idea. This method of creating the gingham checks does create a lot of ends. I'll just turn my work. I haven't woven them all in yet. So that's a negative, I suppose, of this technique. But I think it's worth it because the crispness of the squares really does give such a neat gingham checked finish. To make the ends more manageable, crochet them in as you go, but also you can, when joining the squares and when crocheting, you can encase some of the ends as you go. So that's a really, really good idea to do to make them a little bit more manageable. Tunisian crochet also curls. That's a natural thing with Tunisian. You can see that's happening here. I used this as the central panel for my Picnic on the Beach blanket, and when you crochet a border around this, if you were to do a gingham checked square as a blanket or something, crocheting a border all the way around will help to straighten out that curl and make it sit a little bit more nicer, but left on its own it does curl. One more thing is that the technique I've used here uses a corner to corner method. So we're going to begin with our bottom left corner here and then build up with diagonal rows across. That's how this work does grow. I'll show you a chart here now. And so let's get started. We're going to be starting with this very first square down here in the bottom left corner. Let's begin by making our first square. So using our first colour, yarn A, we simply make 6 chain as we normally would in ordinary crochet. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And these 6 chain, they form the base of our first square. Now in Tunisian crochet, each row is made up of 2 parts, 2 stages. You've got the forward pass, where we crochet forwards along the row, and then the return pass, where we crochet back along where we've just worked. And the front of the work is facing us at all times. We don't turn the work. And also it's important to remember that the loop on the hook, this counts as the first stitch. So we won't be crocheting into the first chain from the hook, but to begin row 1, we'll be crocheting into the second chain. So let's begin row 1 and we insert hook under the top strand of the second chain from the hook. So we've got the loop on the hook, there's the first chain, this is the second chain from the hook, and just insert your hook under the top strand only of that chain, yarn over hook and pull up a loop, leaving the loop on the hook. Now we go into the next chain, insert your hook under the top strand only of the next chain, yarn over hook and pull up a loop. And then we repeat this 3 times more in each of the next 3 chain, insert your hook, yarn over hook and pull up a loop, leaving the loop on the hook. 2 more times, insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, leave the loop on the hook, and then the final chain, insert your hook into that final chain, yarn over hook and pull up a loop. And so now you've got 6 loops on the hook. And as you can see, this is why we can use a traditional crochet hook, because they sit comfortably on a traditional crochet hook and we don't need anything longer. So that's the forward pass of the first row. And now to complete the return pass, we simply do yarn over hook and pull through the first loop only. This is like making one chain at the start of a row or round in traditional crochet. And now for the rest of the return pass, we're going to be pulling through 2 loops. So yarn over hook and pull through 2 loops on the hook. And repeat this all the way along until you've only got 1 loop left on the hook. So yarn over hook, pull through 2 loops. 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 And that's the end of row 1. Now, as you can see, we have these vertical bars going across. You've got 1 at the end here, 1, you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this one right at the edge of the work on this side. You've got these vertical bars, and for Tunisian simple stitch, which is the stitch that we're going to be doing for these gingham checked entrelac squares, we're going to be inserting our hook behind these vertical bars like so. Now, as before, the loop on the hook counts as the first stitch, so we don't crochet behind the vertical bar right at the edge of the work because the loop on the hook counts as the stitch. So to begin row 2, we simply insert the hook behind the next vertical bar in, not the one at the edge of the work, the next one in, and we simply insert our hook behind the vertical bar from side to side like so. And then we do yarn over hook and pull up a loop, leaving the loop on the hook. We then repeat this 4 times in each of the next 4 vertical bars. Insert your hook from side to side behind the next vertical bar, yarn over hook, pull up a loop and leave the loop on the hook. Insert your hook behind the next vertical bar, yarn over hook, pull up a loop and leave the loop on the hook. 2 more. You've got this vertical bar, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, leave the loop on the hook, and now the final vertical bar sits right at the edge of the work. Just insert your hook behind that final vertical bar, yarn over hook and pull up a loop, and there again you've got 6 loops on the hook. So now we complete the standard return pass as we did before, beginning by yarn over hook and just pulling through the first loop on the hook. And then for the rest of the row, it's yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And repeat this, pulling through 2 loops until you just have the 1 loop left on the hook at the end of the row. There we go. And that's the end of row 2. Now rows 3 and 4 are exactly the same as row 2, completing a standard forward pass and standard return pass. So the vertical bar at the edge of the work we don't crochet behind, we insert our hook behind the next vertical bar in, yarn over hook and pull up a loop, and repeat this for each of the vertical bars going across, pulling up a loop and leaving the loop on the hook. Insert your hook behind the vertical bar, yarn over, pull up a loop and leave the loop on the hook. And then the very final vertical bar to go behind is right at the edge of the work. Insert your hook behind that final vertical bar, yarn over hook and pull up a loop. And there yet again you've got the 6 loops on the hook. Complete the standard return pass, yarn over hook, pull through just the first loop on the hook, and then for the rest of the row, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2, 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 until you've got 1 loop left on the hook, and that's the end of row 3. Row 4 is just a repeat of that row again. So insert your hook behind the next vertical bar, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, leave the loop on the hook, go behind the next vertical bar, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, leave the loop on the hook, and repeat this all the way to the end of the row. The final vertical bar is right at the edge of the work there. Yarn over hook, pull up a loop. You've got 6 loops on the hook, and complete a standard return pass. Yarn over hook, pull through just the first loop on the hook to begin with, and then it's yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and do this all the way to the end of the row when you've only got 1 loop left on the hook. And then you can see we've got 4 rows, and it's quite easy to count the rows in Tunisian crochet because you can see each row of vertical bars. So on here you've got our first row here, 1, then we've got 2, 3, and this is 4. And the final row in Tunisian crochet always is a little bit gappy, a little bit holy, and because of that we now do a bind off to close this gappy final row, and that's literally just a series of slip stitches. So just like with the other rows, insert your hook behind the second vertical bar in from the edge, not the outer one, next vertical bar in, and we simply work a slip stitch. So yarn over hook and pull through both the loops on the hook. That's 1 slip stitch. Now go behind the next vertical bar, yarn over hook and work a slip stitch, pulling through all the loops on the hook, and continue this to the end of the row. So yarn over and work a slip stitch, pulling through both loops on the hook. There's 2 more to go, this one here, and then our final vertical bar is this one right at the edge of the work. Yarn over and work a slip stitch, and there we go. This is the end of our first square. Cut the yarn and fasten off by simply drawing the yarn through the loop on the hook, and that's it. And so this is square 1 complete, and this will sit to the bottom left corner of the overall work. I suppose if you're left-handed, this will sit to the bottom right. So moving on to our diagonal row 2, we're going to be now making a square here to the right of this square and one here at the top, working diagonally across. So we're going to be joining our second colour, yarn B, to the bottom right corner of this first square into the side of row 1, so right down here. And if you just rotate the work a little, you'll be able to see the sides of the rows quite clearly. Each row ends with a V, so this is the side of row 4, this is the side of row 3, this is the side of row 2, and then here is the side of row 1. And you're simply inserting your hook under the 2 strands at the side of row 1 in the bottom right corner of the first square. And we join with yarn B, simply pulling it through like so. And now we make 5 chain. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And these 5 chain, they form the base of our second square. Now when we crochet this second square, we're going to be joining it to square 1 as we go. Obviously I'll show you how to do that, but this second square begins in the same way as square 1, and we insert our hook under the top strand of the second chain from the hook. So there's the loop on the hook, there's the first chain, second chain along, insert your hook under the top strand, yarn over hook, pull up a loop and leave the loop on the hook. Insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over hook and pull up a loop, and repeat that twice more. Insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, 1 more chain to do that into, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, and we should now have 5 loops on the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we want 6 loops on the hook because we want this square to be the same size as square 1, and we also want to join this square to square 1 as we go. And so to do that, we insert our hook into the side of row 1 from square 1 into the same place where we joined the yarn. So the same place where we joined the yarn, insert your hook into that same place and pull up a loop. But before we pull up a loop, what we need to do is we want to encase the ends into our work as we go. This will save a lot of sewing up of ends later on. So to do this, make sure it's going over the hook so that we encase it into the work as we go. So there's the end just draped over the hook. And now we can do yarn over and pull up a loop. And here we have the 6 loops on the hook. And so now we're going to be doing our return pass, our second stage to row 1. Now we're going to do this only very slightly differently to the first square because we're joining this square to another. So we're going to do a return pass for joining. And the only difference is instead of pulling through just the 1 loop to begin the row, we go straight away pulling through 2 loops. So we do return pass for joining as follows, which is yarn over hook, pull through 2 loops. And continue doing that, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops until you've got the 1 loop on the hook. And that's the end of row 1 of our second square. And so now we're going to do our second row, and just like before, insert your hook behind the vertical bar of the second vertical bar in from the edge. Loop on the hook counts as the first stitch. There's the first vertical bar. Insert your hook behind the next vertical bar, yarn over hook and pull up a loop. And repeat that 3 more times. That's 1. That's 2. And that's 3. We'll have 5 loops on the hook, and because now we want to insert our hook into the side of the corresponding row on the adjacent square. So here's square 1, here's the side of row 2, we're working on row 2, there's the side of row 2, insert your hook under those 2 strands to the side of row 2. Remember, we want to encase this end into our work, so place that over the hook, yarn over hook and pull up a loop. 6 loops on the hook, and we complete the return pass for joining, pulling through 2 loops at the start of the row and continuing to the end of the row. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. And that's the end of row 2. And so now rows 3 and 4 are made in exactly the same way as row 2. So insert your hook behind the vertical bar, second vertical bar in, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, and continue all the way to the end of the row. And then when you get to the square, we're now working on row 3, and so you insert your hook into the side of row 3 on the square next to it, going under 2 strands. And again, we want to encase that end into our work, so place that over the hook, yarn over hook, and pull up a loop. Return pass for joining, yarn over, pull through 2, 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 and yarn over, pull through 2. That is our third row. 1 more row to do, row 4. So insert your hook into the next, behind the next vertical bar, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, and do so all the way to the end. When you've got 5 loops on the hook, and now we're working on row 4, and so we insert our hook into the side of row 4 on the adjacent square, remembering again just to trap that end in. You won't regret that because that does help with the sewing in later. 6 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, 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 yarn over, pull through 2. That's the end of row 4, and just like before, it's a little bit gappy, so we're now going to do our bind off, working a slip stitch behind each of the next 4 vertical bars. So obviously not the one at the end, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to work a slip stitch behind each of those. So insert your hook behind the vertical bar, yarn over, and pull through both the loops on the hook. That's 1 slip stitch, 3 more to do. That's 2, that's 3, and that's 4. And to end this final square, we finish with a slip stitch in the top right stitch of the adjacent square, and that's here. You can see the tops of the slip stitches that we did at the top of the first square. And so insert your hook under the 2 strands of the top right stitch like so, and work a slip stitch, and that is the second square complete. Now we don't fasten off because we're going to go straight on to complete square 3, and we're going to be joining this square to the square beneath it, and to do that we're simply going to be going into the vertical bars on the square below. So you can quite clearly see here is the first vertical bar. Insert your hook behind that vertical bar from side to side like so, and pull up a loop, and repeat that for each of the vertical bars to the end of the row. Yarn over, pull up a loop, insert your hook behind the next vertical bar, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, insert your hook behind the next vertical bar, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, and the very last vertical bar is the one right at the edge of the work. Insert your hook behind that one, yarn over hook, and pull up a loop. And there, yet again, we've got 6 loops on the hook. Now, because this is an outer square, this is our side edge to our entire gingham checked square. This is going to be an outer square, and because of this, because it's not being joined to a square on the side, we're going to complete the standard return pass just like we did with square 1, and that means we start the return pass by doing yarn over hook and just pulling through the first loop only. And now we complete the rest of the return pass by pulling through 2. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over hook, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and that's the end of row 1 of our third square. And so rows 2 to 4 are just a standard forward pass and standard return pass. So insert your hook into the next vertical bar in from the edge, so not the outer edge one, this one here, yarn over hook and pull up a loop, and repeat this for each vertical bar to the end of the row until we have, remember the one at the very end, the 6 loops on the hook. And then standard return pass, so yarn over hook, pull through just 1 loop, and now yarn over, pull through 2, 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 and yarn over, pull through 2. And so rows 3 and 4 are made in exactly the same way with a standard forward pass, simply inserting your hook behind each vertical bar and pulling up loops, 6 loops on the hook, and then the standard return pass, yarn over, pull through the first loop on the hook, and then all the next ones it's pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. One more row to do, row 4. And now we're going to do the bind off row, and that's simply the slip stitches behind each of the vertical bars. So insert your hook behind the next vertical bar and work a slip stitch. Remembering to do the very final vertical bar right at the edge of the work. And there we go. That's the end of square 3. Fasten off. And so now moving on to diagonal row 3, we are going to be joining our next square here, then working a square there, and then a square here at the top. And to get the gingham effect, this next row, we're going to be working with 2 colours, but we're going to begin with the same colour as our first square. So go back to yarn A and join yarn A just like before, just how we joined this square to our first square. You're going to be joining our fourth square, yarn A, here to the side of row 1, the bottom right corner. So insert your hook under the 2 strands and join with yarn A. And this square is made exactly the same as square 2. So exactly the same way, we begin by making 5 chain. This forms the base of our fourth square. Insert your hook into the second chain from the hook and then each chain to the end. And then just like before, we now insert our hook into the same place as where we joined the yarn, making sure we encase that end, yarn over, pull up a loop, 6 loops on the hook. And now because we're joining this square to another one, we begin the return pass by pulling through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And there's the first end of the first row. Second row, insert your hook behind the next vertical bar, yarn over, pull up a loop, repeat this to the final vertical bar, 5 loops on the hook, and now we're working on row 2, so insert your hook into the side of row 2 on the adjacent square, remembering to trap in that end, yarn over, hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and continue that to the end. That's the end of row 2, and rows 3 and 4 are made in exactly the same way. And there's the end of row 4. And so now we're going to do the bind off, working a slip stitch behind each of the next 4 vertical bars. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now to create the gingham effect, because that's what we want. Gingham is made with 3 colours. We're now going to insert our hook into the top right stitch of this adjacent square, inserting your hook under both strands, but here we're going to let yarn A go and we're going to join with yarn C, our 3rd colour, and then we simply pull that through to join. And so now square number 5, which is going to be sitting here, we're joining it obviously to the square below, but also to the side of this square here. So we're going to be completing forward pass for joining and return pass for joining, which is simply insert your hook behind the vertical bar on the square below, yarn over, hook, pull up a loop, and repeat that for each of the vertical bars. And now we are now joining this square to this square, and so we are working on row 1 of our square, and so we're going to be joining it to the side of row 1 of the square we want to join it to. And so here it's quite clear, it's that little corner space behind the 2 strands. Insert your hook into that space, yarn over, and pull up a loop. There you've got the 6 loops on the hook, return pass for joining, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and continue doing that to the end when you've got 1 loop on the hook. That's row 1. And so now row 2, insert your hook behind the next vertical bar, pull up a loop, and continue doing that to the end. We're now joining this square to the side of row 2 of the next square. So insert your hook underneath the 2 strands to the side of row 2 of this adjacent square and pull up a loop. Return pass for joining, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and continue that to the end. And that is the side, and that's the end of row 2. Repeat this 2 more times for row 3 and row 4. And that's 4 rows. And so now we're going to do the bind off, slip stitch behind each of the next 4 vertical bars. And then when we get to the end, we want to, our next square, we want it to be back in our first colour, yarn A. And so now we insert our hook into the top right stitch of the adjacent square and we join with our first colour, yarn A, like so. And now we're going to be making this square exactly the same as our square number 3. We're joining this square at the bottom to this square. So yarn over hook, pull up a loop, insert your hook behind each vertical strand, pulling up loops as you go. And remembering to do that very final vertical strand right at the edge of the work. And there you've got your 6 loops on the hook. And because this is an outside square, we've got the outer edge, we begin the standard return pass, yarn over hook, pull through the first loop on the hook only, and the rest of the row, the return pass, is putting through 2 loops. There we go. Our second row, standard forward pass, inserting your hook behind each of the vertical strands, remembering the one at the edge, and then standard return pass, pulling through the 1 loop, and then the 2. And rows 3 and 4 are made in exactly the same way. There we go, and then we work the bind off. Slip stitches behind each vertical bar to the end. And there we go. We've done our 3rd diagonal row, and you can now see the gingham checks really taking shape. So we've covered everything that you need to carry on and increase this square. We simply continue with diagonal rows across. Make sure you look at the colour chart. And every single row begins with a square like square 2. That's how we start each diagonal row. Every middle square, so every square that we're doing in the middle of the rows, is like this one, square number 5. And then every final square of the row is like square number 3. And so continue to work your diagonal rows, paying attention to the colour changes. So the even numbered rows, so 2, 4, and then 6 will be in the solid colour B, my pink colour. And the odd numbered rows will be the alternating between white, red, white, red. And we continue to build these squares until you've got the desired width at the bottom. And when you carry on, this is what you will end up with. Here I've done 9 diagonal rows, so this was our row 3, row 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and this one here is my 9th row. As you can see, the work does tend to curl. That's a natural phenomena within Tunisian crochet, and by crocheting around this square with a border, that will tame that curl. And here I've got 9 squares across at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And so now I am going to decrease the work. We want to complete our overall square. And so all that we do differently now is, instead of joining a square here, so continuing to increase the work, we're going to join our next row, our next square here on top of this outer square here. So we've got to the width we want to go to, and now we're going to decrease. So we're going to join with yarn B. This is row number 10, so we're going to be doing a solid colour, my pinks here, and we simply join it to the outer top right stitch of the square below where we want to join it. So we want our square to sit here, and so we join it to the top right outer stitch on the square below, the same place where we work the slip stitch in when we've been joining the squares on previous rows. So join yarn B to that stitch, and now we simply carry on with our forward pass for joining and then our return pass for joining. So now we're in exactly the same point that we would be at the start of a middle square, so like our square number 5, and we simply do Tunisian simple stitches. So insert hook behind the vertical bar to the bottom, yarn over hook, pull up a loop, and we're just carrying on exactly what we've been doing with our middle squares throughout all the rows. So there we now have 5 loops on the hook. Obviously now we're joining it to this square here. So insert your hook into the side of row 1 of that adjacent square. There we've got our 6 loops on the hook, and this is a return pass for joining because we're joining it to this square to the side. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, and continue doing exactly what we've done so far. Because we've joined the yarn there, these 2 vertical bars can look a little bit close together, so just pay attention when you're doing the forward pass on row 2 that you don't go into the outer edge, the vertical bar at the outer edge there, but you go into the second vertical bar in. And so now every square is made with a forward pass for joining, picking up a loop behind each vertical bar till you've got the 5 loops on the hook, and then inserting your hook into the adjacent row on the adjacent square, 6 loops on the hook, and return pass for joining, pulling through 2 loops all the way. Each square is made in this way. So carry on following the colour chart. When I get to the end of this row, I'll show you how we stop our final square of this row to make sure that we're decreasing the work at the top as well as at the bottom and the sides. So I'm just on the final bind off from our final square, just working a slip stitch behind each of the vertical bars, and just like all of our middle squares, we end this square with a slip stitch to the top right stitch on the adjacent square, like so. And then that is it, because we don't want to increase the square in height here. We want to stop. We're decreasing at the start and end of each diagonal row, and so we simply fasten off the yarn here, and as you can see, then we have started this row above the square below it, and now we end the row to the side of this square, and you can see by doing that we will then create our end square shape. So fasten off, and then we'll start our next diagonal row with the square here above the square we started the previous row with. So we start the next colour here and then end that row with a square here, and repeat until we have a total gingham checked square. And so here I am, nearly at the very end, just got the one final square to do in the corner, and on each diagonal row we've decreased each time to bring this whole square nearly to a close. So let's finish by doing our very final square, which is crocheted just like all the others. That's it. Got one last slip stitch to do into the top stitch of the adjacent square and fasten off. And there we go. Our gingham checked square is complete. There are lots of ends to weave in. Some we've woven in as we've gone along. But the beauty of Tunisian crochet is you've got quite a dense background here, so you can quite easily lose the ends into this dense background just by weaving one way, then the other, and then the other way behind each square, and that tucks the ends really neatly away. But it gives such a lovely, clean and crisp gingham check, and I think it looks lovely. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Thanks for watching.